Hey, I'm the Kinky Polyatheist, and today I'm here with Drgn and Cassandra, and we're going to talk about poly relationship styles. Stick around. So today we're going to talk to Drgn and Cassandra about how their poly relationship comes together and what's involved and how they've been keeping it running.
I'm Drgn, or GW. Been poly, also in the kink and leather communities for 6 years.
I'm Cassandra, or Sassy. He calls me Little One, so if that happens to come up, that's why. I've been poly pretty much my entire life.
Like, subscribe, and don't forget we also have a podcast now that you can check out. We're going to kick this off talking about nesting partners and how tricky it is to do little things like decorating the house. I walked all the way through IKEA, bought nothing, because I didn't know what I liked.
So now on the opposite of that in poly, when you have multiple partners, now you have to figure out what your aesthetic is with everybody involved. We're two totally opposite people. If you can't tell by our outfits, you should see our home. I am farm chic. He is dragons and dungeons. And we have to somehow figure out how to mix dragons.
So you're like dungeon chic.
Uh-huh.
We need to coin that. We need to make that a thing.
But on a serious note, some poly people live together. They live in one house. I could not imagine trying to figure out what my aesthetic is if my other partner and his other partner and then us two all lived under one roof. What would our IKEA furniture look like?
I've actually seen a couple instances where people had more than one master bedroom so that everyone could get their own master bedroom and it could be your space. And if somebody wants to be a guest in your space, that's great. But you don't have to make those compromises.
Yeah.
And, I have actually played around with ideas of getting a large house or a compound or something like that. And I know she's toyed around with it too. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that's just not realistic unless you're,
You have to have really good friends.
Yeah.
or a whole lot of money.
Yeah. Or a whole lot of money.
But
A whole lot of money.
we're also primary partners, so even if we lived on a compound or in a bigger house with 3 master bedrooms, we would still live in the same bedroom because that's our dynamic.
Gotcha.
Because we have talked about in the future maybe possibly having a submissive move in with us because as our relationship has grown, our DS dynamic has lessened because it's hard to have a DS dynamic with someone you live with because it's everyday life. I work. I work 10 hours a day. He works 8 hours a day. I'm not going to come, you get off work and I'm not going to take your boots off and cook you dinner and do the dishes and do the laundry and everything that comes with a submissive relationship, especially, I should say all submissives. I am a service bottom. I get pleasure off of doing these things. I don't have time, though, in my everyday life to do that. So I'm like, I need your help. I need you to do the laundry and I need you to cook dinner tonight. I just don't have the energy. So we've talked about, like I said, having a submissive eventually move in for him and for us. And when that person moves in with us, we would still live in the same house, in the same bedroom, and that person would have their own bedroom. Yes, they could do what they want with their decor, but our decor will always be our decor piece.
It sounds like you said you were primaries. Like, what is your poly relationship style, if you have one, because you don't have to label it? And can you just explain it for people who don't know what that even means?
Our relationship styles in poly are completely different. I'm hierarchical, and he is
Anarchist.
I believe that because we are primaries, that our needs come before any other partner's needs. We let our partners know that ahead of time that we practice hierarchical poly, because going into a poly relationship is about communication and going over what is allowed and what's not allowed. One of the first things I share is we are hierarchical, which means if he has a car accident, I'm leaving wherever I am and I'm going to him. There's not a question about it. You don't have to argue it. You don't have to say, well, we're on a date. I don't care. I'm leaving. It's also that if I have a company party and I want to bring my primary because I don't want my company to know I'm poly, he needs to drop what he's doing and he needs to come with me.
Fill that role.
Yes. Because you are my primary and that's what you agreed to when you entered this relationship with me.
I like that you gave a good description of what primary means to you. And on top of that, also, it sounds like nesting partners is rooted in there. Do you already have that conversation?
Yes.
And polyanarchy.
Yes. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. So polyanarchy is, well, what's anarchy? It's a lack of structure. Well, technically it's a lack of government, but a lack of structure. It's the arbitrary rules. Mm-hmm. Okay? And for me, they're arbitrary. For her, they're necessary. Okay? For anybody else out there, I'm not saying your rules are arbitrary. They are for me. I don't like to set expectations based off of somebody else's design, unless it is a conscious decision that I am making, like I have with her. Okay? For her, I am hierarchical. For her, I have a primary. I do not have secondaries or tertiaries or whatever.
Right.
Okay? Everybody else is on equal footing. Well, everybody else starts on equal footing. And then as the relationship evolves, the relationship evolves. Each individual person is an individual person. Imagine that. Funny how that works. Huh? Again, it's the structure that kind of forces a relationship to have to go in a certain way. I don't like that. It feels like a restriction. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love about poly, one of the things I love about kink and leather, is the lack of restriction. Mm-hmm. I get to do what feels right to me, regardless of what society says.
Yeah.
I get to slough off that the social conditioning.
Which is not easy to do.
No, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. Again, because I love her, because I have committed myself to her, and all relationships, no matter what it is, takes communication and compromise. Mm-hmm. One of our compromises is she is my primary, and I treat her as a primary. Even though I particularly don't agree with that structure, for her, I am doing it.
And that's not saying in the future we can't change our dynamic. The reason why primary is important to me is because I have trust issues from past relationships. I have commitment issues from past relationships. Mm-hmm. So having that primary relationship makes me feel stable and grounded. So if another relationship fails, I still know I have a home. I still know that I have a heart that loves me and a person that cares for me. But that's not saying that in the future when I get more stable with him and I get more stable with myself and, therapy keeps working, that we can't change our dynamic to be less hierarchical. We'll always be primaries and nesting partners because that's just our dynamic.
We live with each other.
Yes, we do. We're buying a house together.
We are nesting partners, which comes with a whole other realm of commitments to each other when you decide to actually live with one particular partner. And it's something that the rest of your partners need to understand.
Oh, yeah.
Which means it's on you. You as in me, I'm pointing at me just in case. To communicate that with all of your partners. Because, obviously, communication is everything.
So I have one small question. I don't want to put labels on your relationship, but I'm going to use a couple of labels so that you can correct me.
Yeah.
What I'm kind of hearing is that there's a hierarchical agreement between the two of you, and you also sound like solo poly. And I'm curious, how would you say you differ from that? Am I close when I say that?
Poly, anarchy, and solo poly are very similar. And I think the main difference is while solo poly doesn't have a lot of structure, there is still the structure or the focus on I'm in a committed relationship with myself and then everybody else is a secondary. Mm-hmm. And that's what it feels like to me when I listen to you explain what it is
my version of solo poly
and what I've read. It still puts a hierarchical structure on it just with you at the top.
That's interesting.
Okay. There are times that I feel that it's necessary that I am not the priority. Not often. Mm-hmm. It can't be often because you start destroying yourself. For me, every time I make a sacrifice and do something that I don't want to do because one of my partners does want to do it, guess what? I'm not putting me first. Mm-hmm. And to limit myself to not being able to do that because of, solo poly, and I have to put myself first because that's the structure that I live by. No. 98% of the time can you say that I live solo poly yet. But it's that 2% that I'm going to say no.
Thanks for the distinction. Actually, I'm curious if you've had any conversation about littles with, because I have the feeling she might be.
Oh, she's a
She's
brat little.
She
Oh,
was
yeah.
like
100%.
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Her and I.
it took me 4 months? 3 months to convince her that she was a little.
It wasn't even you that convinced me, first of all.
Well, the horrible thing about it, I've been telling her that she's a little for 3 months,
yeah.
and she comes outside, and somebody else mentions that she's a little. She's like, I'm not a little. Stumps her foot, and then she goes,
we were at a advanced belonging class in the leather community, and one of the other leathermen were like, yeah, you're little. And I'm like, I'm not a little. I'm a little boy.
yeah.
And then I ran into her and I said, they think I'm a little.
And then everybody was like, we're confused.
You didn't know? All right. Yeah, I would definitely love to have you back for another interview specifically about little or littles.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love it.
Sweet. Link will be in the description once that's done. And it's interesting that you could just keep evolving.
Yep.
Like, you could come across a relationship style or a polytool style and then just decide, you know what? It was great. Also, I've evolved since then. Or the people around me, the polycule has evolved, and I never thought this would happen, but now it is, and we're going to go with it, you know?
Exactly. That's what I said. I mean, at one point we could be not hierarchical. It all depends on where I come mentally. We've actually had discussions before, too, of if we'd be together forever. We poly so differently. If I don't change the way I poly, I'm not ever going to ask him to change. We could still be partners. Who knows if we'd always be primary partners. At one point, we could evolve out of that and go back into a DS dynamic or primary partners who are not living together.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we don't know what the future holds, and we don't try to figure out what the future holds. And that's the nice thing about poly is I don't need to. If it evolves out of it or if it evolves deeper, that happens.
It sounds like you guys have discussed exit strategies. Does that
Oh,
make sense?
100%.
That's incredible. That's wonderful.
We moved in together. In poly relationships, we just discussed change. We have an exit strategy that if at any point we decide this isn't working out, we have a 30-day that we give the other person to figure out their next move. We're not just going to fight and kick that person out and say, you can't live here anymore. Because then that puts somebody in a very difficult position. And at one point we loved each other, and you need to have a mutual respect for that person.
Yep.
That even though today is not working out, if you want to leave for 30 days while I figure out where I'm going, that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not leaving until I know where I'm going, because I'm not living in my car or in a storage unit or on a friend's couch when I've helped you pay for this roof over our heads for the last 15 months.
And if I love you as much as I say I love you, even when we're fighting and we've decided we're not a match, we should still be respecting each other.
Yeah.
And that's all about where it comes back down to the communication. Communication in poly is the most important key thing ever. And I wish more people in the Malcolm had as much communication as we have.
The exit strategy, as you called it, and I've actually never heard it put that way. It was brilliant. By not talking about something, it doesn't go away.
Agreed.
By not talking about it, it doesn't mean that it'll never happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We talk about it, we make the plans, we know what's going to happen in hopes that it will never happen. But we don't know. We're not soothsayers, we're not fortune tellers. We never understand or know what life will bring.
But it also helps you get prepared.
Absolutely.
Like, if something does catastrophically happen, you know that for the next 30 days, you could figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had something like that with one of my ex-girlfriends, where we made that agreement. If we decide this is not going to work, then I'm going to be asked to move out, or whether I move out myself, there's going to be 30 more days, and rent will be paid again, regardless. So when things went down, and I was like, okay, well, I'm moving out, I had 28 days before the next rent, so I paid it. As just part of, well, I'm moving out, here's next month's rent. And there was never a concern about that.
Agreed on. It was already discussed. When it was discussed, it was a hope this never happens, but just in case.
And from a place of logical thinking instead of emotional, like triggering and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I said, if he or I, whoever's the person moving out, decides, the person that's staying decides, I can't live with you while you prepare your stuff to move out because it would be too hard, that's on you. If you want to go live in a hotel for 30 days, as long as you're still paying your portion of these bills for that 30 days, so the other person's not stuck, that is solely the person that's staying in that unit. You don't have to. I'm not asking you to move out. I'm not asking you to leave for 30 days while I pack up my stuff. it's up to that person. But you don't want to leave somebody in a bind because, again, we are community. We're going to run into each other. I'm going to see you at a lunch. I'm going to see you at a poly discussion group. I'm going to see you around.
Yeah.
The community is too small to treat people like monogamous people treat each other because in their world it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Monogamous people, they have a plethora of people. If you ever go on a dating site and you try to put down that you are non-monogamous, your dating pool is this big and you have seen everybody on Facebook. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you know who they are, you know who they're dating, you know where they work.
You've probably dated a couple of them.
Or you've dated their partner.
Or you've dated their partners.
Yep.
And that's the thing is we can't get jealous if one of your exes ends up with one of your best friends. You can't say, well, chicks before dicks or bros before hoes. Our community's just too small for it. Just have conversion, be happy for the person, and move on. But it's very important to know that when you have these discussions about exit strategies or anything like that, you have to have them in a time and a place where you're not angry. Do not have the conversation in the midst of a fight or at the end of that fight where it clicks on your head, oh, darn, what happens if we don't work out on the next fight? Mm-hmm. That's not when you should be having the discussion. Right. You should be having the discussion either before you move in or on a random Tuesday at dinner being like, hey, I kind of thought about it. We just moved in with each other. Well, what happens if this, for some reason, doesn't work out? I want it to work out, but what happens if it doesn't? Mm-hmm. How are we going to split the things that we bought while we were together? How are we going to do the things? And that, is a conversation we had yesterday. We're going to get a joint bank account. And because we're buying a house together, we don't plan on leaving each other, but we're keeping individual accounts. We're only going to put the money that's for bills and emergencies. If the AC goes out or anything like that, that will be in a joint account. Our individual accounts are still ours. What you do with your money is what you do with your money. Mm. If you need to come to me and say, hey, I'm out of money and I get $100 from you, that's fine. I'm not ever going to leave you stranded. I'm going to give you $100. But it still gives you your own aid. Mm-hmm. That if something happens and you're out, all I do is reroute where that money that was going into the house is now going straight into my own bank account. Mm-hmm. We close that joint one and we're done.
And I've definitely heard this strategy working way better than the opposite. Like having your money come into your accounts and then figuring out what the bills and everything are and then putting things to a joint account versus having all the money go into the joint account and then paying yourself an allowance. I've heard that's just the recipe of disaster in so many relationships. Yeah. And it's amazing how many relationships don't talk about money or don't talk to your friends about how they manage their money. So I like that you brought that up. Thank you.
It's just very important, Polly, to have every discussion you need of. Any discussion that you think will cause something in the future, you need to have.
If you've ever had a thought, talk about it.
And I do. I message him randomly, and I'll be like, hey, I just had this thought. Uh-huh. And I'll type it to him. I'll be like, we don't have to have the discussion right now. I just needed you to be aware that this was a thought I had.
Yeah, let's talk about it later.
Yeah, and whether that be something as small as I want to go to Germany and I don't know which partner to choose, to it being I want to have a child. Where do you stand on this? Mm-hmm. Everything needs to be discussed. Everything. Your condom rules. How many days per week you are allowed to allot another partner. Especially in primary nesting partner relationships with kids. I need you home X amount of days because I can't handle everything on my own. And if you're out having fun all the time and I'm at home with the children all the time because I don't have a partner or my partners are super busy, that's not fair to the other person. And I also want to make sure that our relationship is always the strongest because at the end of the day, you are my primary and what we have will work through anything else that happens outside of this world.
I've actually heard someone say the way they define their primary was that you're the person I'm willing to fight with. You're the person I'm willing to sit down and have a giant argument with until we understand each other and work through it. Whereas a lot of their secondaries are like, yes, we'll fight once or twice, but why would we continue?
I'm that way.
Yeah.
That is how I call it. He does it because, again, he's not hierarchical. He's not, to him, everybody is an equal playing field. If he's willing to fight with this one, he's willing to fight with that one. And at the end of the day,
well, I guess there's an agreement there that I'm going to be willing to work through the hard stuff with you.
Yeah.
I am probably 3 and I'm done. Mm-hmm. I'm like, after 3 fights on a secondary, I'm like, well, what's the point of this? You're supposed to be
my not stressful relationship. Every relationship has stress. I don't know how to word it properly. I just don't want to fight with you. I live at home with my primary. That is where the stress lies a lot of the time. And I use my other partners as a way to de-stress. Get out of the normal, everyday life to life. I'm still going to have a deep, full connection with you. And I'm still going to love you. And I'm still have all of that. I will still fight with you. Tidbit fights. I don't want to have a huge bout of an argument over finances or over whatever. You're not my primary. And that's how I look at it. You're not my primary. I'm not going to have primary arguments with you. I have a current partner that's all we're doing right now is we're fighting. He's even had to butt into the conversation and be like, she's not your primary. You're not her primary. You can't be having these arguments. She's never going to dedicate as much time to you as she does to me because you're not her primary.
Mm-hmm. Earlier on in this conversation, like way earlier on in this conversation, I think I heard you say you're living together. You have another partner you see once a month, another partner you see maybe once a week. And I find that that's kind of a good gauge for how do you spend your time, is what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. However you just spend your time, that's the number of people you're going to see. If you can manage to have a schedule where you see 3 people a week, good for you. Mm-hmm. But it all comes down to how do you manage your time and communicating that to everyone involved.
So I wanted to bring up something because we've touched on it. It's expectations. Expectations, I think, are the number one cause of success and failure. Managing your expectations correctly is vitally important to the success of a relationship, the success of your career, the success of so many aspects of your life. Mm-hmm. Also, the failures of those. One thing that I noticed in monogamy, when you go out on a date, you ask somebody out on a date in the monogamous world, the expectation is we are on a date to see if we want to go on date number 2. That's okay.
That's that relationship escalator.
Yeah.
We don't do that in poly. I go on a date just because you're fun and I want to go on a date with you.
Right? I actually communicate and set the expectation, manage the expectation that I want to take you to dinner and see if we connect.
Yep.
The sole purpose of this dinner is to see if our energies mesh, to see if our energies are attracted to each other, to see if we connect.
Mm-hmm. And that could be
That's it. It could be connecting as friends. It could be connecting as lovers and not relationship. It could be connecting as relationship and not lovers.
Or DS and nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you start throwing in the different variants of dominant and submissive and master-slave relationships. Why limit yourself to, I didn't get on with this person and I don't want to go on a second date? That's it. Bye.
Yeah, you could be like losing some of the best friends you ever could have had in life and not even realize it.
Yeah.
I guess.
You know, right? Setting the expectation. Me and you, when we moved in together, we had an expectations conversation. Every single time I start talking to somebody, and it's more than just, acquaintance banter back and forth, a conversation about expectations happen. This is what I see this being. What are your expectations in what you see this being? These are my expectations. My expectations are always, I want to see if our energies mesh. I could think that you're the most attractive thing on the planet. If our energies don't mesh, it's not going to work. It's just not. Which is why I end up being attracted to so many different types, going back to that monogamous what's your type thing. Mm-hmm. I'm attracted to energy.
Yeah, I love it.
That's it. 110%. I have actually noticed within my own psyche that I could look at somebody and find them incredibly physically attractive on that baser instinct level. And I get to know them a little bit better, and our energies just mesh in that way to where they're just not as attractive to me anymore, if at all. Mm-hmm. And then the opposite way around, that baser instinct tells me that this person isn't a suitable mate. Because essentially that's what attraction is your baser instinct telling you this is a suitable mate, this isn't a suitable mate. The energies start meshing, and all of a sudden, they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, I find it pretty interesting for me personally. For the first time in my life, like once I went poly, I started to describe man, I've got a crush on just about everybody.
Right?
And it's because I can start appreciating people for who they are
Mhm.
and not expecting the relationship to go to a next level. So I'll have a crush on the way somebody handles themselves in a pinch, or maybe a crush on how somebody like shows their empathic side, or the way they take charge, or things like that. But it doesn't mean I'm trying to take the relationship to the next level.
Yeah.
So I've never used the word crush so much and meant it
Right?
since I became poly. And
Yeah.
it's a huge turning point for me that I'm really glad I got a chance to experience.
Polly showed me that I can love women and not have to be in a sexual relationship with them. I can appreciate everything about them. I can appreciate. I didn't realize how beautiful women were on the inside. I've always been very much of all my friends were men, and Polly showed me that again, it doesn't matter what gender somebody is or anything like that. People are beautiful, and you can have connections, really deep connections with anybody, and it doesn't have to turn to a sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I've loved about learning from Polly. Connection.
That's actually something that could be touched on too, because there's a variation in the way an individual person evolves within a relationship too, based off of emotions and sex.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This one, little one, she is very much a relationship feelings, emotional feelings first, and then that builds the sexual attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I'm very much the sex builds the emotional attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of those is bad. You could exist with a partner with those things mismatching also.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes setting proper expectations and communication.
And it's awesome that you guys have called that out into the open so that you know how the other person's operating.
Mm-hmm. We kind of had to, especially at first when we were still learning each other, you know, because she is more of the emotional person. She could have that emotional connection and that emotional relationship with somebody and it never go to the physical state at all. She was having a really hard time with how I am, that she always felt like I was skipping to the sex.
So I was taking it very personally. Like
Yeah.
I was taking it as our sex life isn't good enough for you because on the first date you have to have sex with this person.
Mm-hmm.
When for me, that's step one.
Gotcha.
With her, the emotional connection is step one.
I don't have to have sex with any of my other partners. I'm very sexually satisfied. To me, it's all about emotional connection. Not so much too much of my life out there. Both of my other partners I've never had sex with. I care about them. I would if the opportunity arose, but I spend that time doing things with them that I don't get to do with him. You know, one of my partners loves to go to the strip. I love to go to the strip. So we spend our dates going to the strip and eating at the fancy restaurants and then walking to Bellagio and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, going into the Caesar's Palace and then across the street to the, you know, Cosmo or whatever. That's how we spend our dates. So by the time the date's over, it's time for bed and we just don't have that. But I don't get that with him. He'll never go to the strip with me unless it's a special occasion and I get on both knees and beg.
I have lived in Las Vegas for 15 years. That should answer your question.
But he, on the other hand, he likes his first dates to be at home. I'll order food or I'll cook and you come over and we'll watch a movie and I already know what's going to happen. Just don't have sex in my bed.
It's not a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen. I'm just setting it up to happen if.
So you're a Netflix and chill kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless it's a stranger that he met on the internet and then I have a no.
Well, if it's a stranger that I met on the internet, I'm not doing that. I do have standards. I do have standards. So again, hedonist, empath, energies meshing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to know how dedicated to a relationship I could be without that connection, and it has nothing to do with the carnal act of, you know, sexual pleasure that I am experiencing. No, I need to know how readily you accept my energy. I need to know how well I can manipulate your energy in those situations to elicit the most pleasure out of you, because that's how I get pleasure. Going months and months and months without experiencing that, it feels like it's a waste of time to me. Because we could dedicate 6 or 7 months to building this relationship, and then we finally get to that point where we're going to go physical, And I find that there's no energy connection there.
And see, that's where we're different, because I'm okay with that. Because I'm still having fun with you. I'm still
Because you're not a hedonistic empath.
Correct.
Well, I get the feeling, just based on what you said so far, was that you would be okay with it because you would just call them a friend.
Yeah, but the effort that it takes to build a relationship, especially a relationship outside of your primary, if you are in a hierarchical, that's a lot. It's a huge investment. I don't like investing in things that I'm not fairly sure are going to,
And I find that the upfront communication is the thing that really just makes a lot of that even ever happening. You're honest with someone up front. You're like, I'm poly, this is how it works, these are the things I like, these are the things I don't like, where are you at?
Yeah.
So your whole first date that you were talking about, where you're comparing energies, seeing where you meet, probably just gets all that out in the open so fast that the idea of being on a 6 month and not knowing doesn't even sound like possible.
Yeah.
That's
and then you
awesome.
put the fact that we're in the kink community on top of that, so you got to put in what's your kinks, what are not your kinks, what are your hard limits, your soft limits.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that goes into a first date.
Yeah.
Will you have sushi with me? Because my boyfriend's on keto and will never eat sushi with me. So do you eat sushi? That is a number one conversation starter on a first date for me. Are you going to go to Korean barbecue with me?
Yeah.
Will you eat Chinese food with me? Will you be a foodie with me that's not IHOP or El Pollo Loco, because those are the only two keto restaurants this man likes?
Not the only ones, just the least expensive ones.
Thank you both so much for coming. If you have any questions, you can send them to ask@kinkypolyatheist.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out the podcast. See you guys next time.